Good afternoon, everybody, to the Administrative Committee on Monday, March 23rd, 2026. To my left is Sage, to my right is Scott, and I am Bryce, and we are happy to be here this afternoon. Let's dive in and get going on a pretty hefty Administrative Committee agenda. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the Administrative Committee meeting minutes from January 26th, 2026. Any comments, questions about those? All right, move to approve.
I move to approve.
Great.
Second.
Cool. We can put that on consent.
Cool.
Great. Next thing on the agenda, hello, Amanda, for the Earth Day celebration, alcohol use request in East City Park. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. In your packets is a community staff report for the alcohol use request in East City Park for the Earth Day celebration. It's hosted by Inland Northways. This is following standard operating procedures. Normally, we can't have open containers of alcohol in parks unless it's pursuant to a resolution. As a reminder, for these types of requests, a beer garden is required to contain the open containers of alcohol. No changes except for date of the event, but this honors community preservation of the environment. Again, hosted by Inland Northways, live music, eco-minded organizations, 25 by 25 foot beer garden. It's in Appendix A of the resolution. Happy to answer any questions. This has been reviewed by legal. No serious deviations. And the applicant is here to answer specific questions about the event. If you have questions about process, happy to answer those.
My only question is on the size of the beer garden. So I'm glad you mentioned the 25 by 25. Is that the maximum allowed side
Nope.
by city code in parks, or is that okay?
No. So beer garden is at the applicant's request. The only stipulations that we have on beer gardens is they have to meet a certain height requirement and are designed in such a way that someone cannot just simply pass underneath it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I think the largest one we've had used all existing city barricades, which are available for rent at like $2 a pop.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I don't have any questions on it.
Great. I have no questions, seeing that we've done stuff like this or even this event for a couple of years. So move to approve and consent.
Consent. Good. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Amanda. Thanks. All right. Next item on the agenda is Woodbury Replat Development Agreement Amendment, and this word is difficult for me to say. Monumentation
You got it.
agreement with Bob. Hello. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Excuse me. So I believe February 3rd or February 2nd, we had all of our new council members were sworn in and fulfilling their duties at that point in time. So you may remember that the city council recently approved a replat of the Woodbury First subdivision. With the approval of that plat, there were some new conditions placed on the development, and the development and the property lines and all that changed for the plat. So as part of the process to get that final plat recorded, we needed to update or amend the development agreement, and we also needed to amend the monumentation agreement. For anybody who isn't familiar, this is the location of the Woodbury development. This is the previous plat. You might, oh, there it is. Particularly might pay attention to this area here and this area here. I'm going to try to go fast. So these are all the areas where the replat took place. And like I said, everybody has already seen that before. So what the amendment did for the development agreement was it addressed the issue of the pavers, the concrete paver sidewalk. City council approved it on the condition that the pavers were set in concrete, and that the paver maintenance The HOA of the development entered into an agreement with the city saying that the HOA would assume maintenance of the concrete paver sidewalks. And so the development agreement has been amended to reflect those conditions. The other thing is that with the change in the property lines and all of that, the phasing plan changed. So we changed the development agreement to reflect those changes. Excuse me, sorry. The monumentation agreement, number of property lines, number of pins, all that stuff changed. So the estimated cost to update to do the development changed. I do need to point out that there was in the monumentation agreement, there was a mix up. And so the estimate for the PLS gave us got put in as the security amount and not the cost amount. So we do need to revise that monumentation to fix some of those changes. And so the estimated amount was $4,000. The security requires 120% of the security required, and so the security amount should be $4,800.
Will that, is that going through a review process, or will that just be?
We'll revise it, and then it'll go back to legal, and it'll get fixed before it goes into the final the final packet for committee.
Great, thank you.
So our recommendation is to approve the amendments to the development agreement and the monumentation agreement. And I would like to answer any questions that you might have.
I don't have any questions. If you guys have other questions, but I'll talk about it after you guys have your questions.
I don't have any questions.
Yeah, I feel like we've continued to work up on Woodbury here, kind of in this replat for a while. So I feel like keeping that moving and doing what we need to do. But
My only recommendation is we take it to full council because it deals with me. I'm sorry, that might mean staff will have to come, but
There'd be two options. I mean, either it can go on consent and then it can be removed, or I think, I'll take a look at the agenda. It's relatively light. I think we'll have the utility rate study will be the largest item on regular agenda. So if we just want to go ahead and put it on regular, that way you can recuse yourself from that and not have to recuse from the entire consent agenda vote.
I would feel better if it was that way, just so it doesn't feel like I'm
Mhm.
sneaking something
Sure.
by or,
Yep. We can do that.
sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, staff, that requires you guys.
yeah, we can recommend for approval and go on full agenda.
Yep.
Regular agenda.
Sounds good.
Great. Cool. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
All right. Item number 4, North and South Mountain View pedestrian improvements, bid results and contract award. Scott. All right, very good. Perfect. Threw me off there. Yeah.
Scott.
Yeah. Great.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Got before you today the brief history and bid results on this one. If you want to go through the beginning of it here.
Oh, sorry. A little bit of a brain. So this is the vicinity map for the TAP North-South Mountain View. So as you can see, there's a stretch from F Street to about the curve on Mountain View on the north end, and then the south end goes from essentially the bridge that's north of White Avenue. You can't see that, Joseph Street, through there with a little bit of work on Harold Street.
Yeah, so the history on this one, again, this is a TAP fund that we had applied for back in 2022. At the time, they still had some leftover COVID money. So they were encouraging everybody to actually apply for 2 projects. So we were awarded 2 projects. So we were able to secure both the north and south versions of Mountain View on this one. Just as he was showing you too, the north segment's doing about 1,600 feet of new curb and gutter and sidewalk on just the west side of Mountain View. And the east side had been previously taken care of by the development doing the improvements, the offsite improvements there. Then the southern segment, it's about 900 feet of curb gutter and sidewalk, basically, yeah, going from Joseph to the bridge, hitting both sides of Mountain View. And then the other additional enhancements that's part of this is there will be a new pedestrian warning beacon, one of the rapid flash beacons up there at Paradise Path Crossing. We'll be doing the gap of sidewalk there on the north side of Latah County Fairgrounds where it's missing up there. And then doing some intersection improvements over on Blaine and Harold, which is basically a bulb out to kind of help with sight distance of everybody trying to take a left right out of there on the, the side street by the armory.
So this is just kind of existing conditions, what it looks like today. This is the picture on the left is taken roughly at the Herc. So as you can see, the improvements on the left side of the road have not been done. So that's going to be what this project is. Curb, gutter, sidewalk, green strips in areas. And then this one, so picture on the left, that is Blaine and Harold. That's the bulb out that Scott was just talking about, to improve intersection geometry through there. And then the picture on the right is Mountain View, more on the north end of this project where there isn't currently sidewalk. And then this is what it's going to look like. Do I have to press anything?
Yeah, you should just hit the button.
Okay. So this is the south one.
Fancy, I like it.
So yeah, curb, gutter, sidewalk, minor storm improvements in that area. And then this is the north end.
Starting from the pool heading north.
All on the west side of the road up there.
This will be curb adjacent sidewalk there on the west side of what can fit within the right of way.
Who did the renderings on those?
We did. Cool. Yeah. So the construction bid results, City of Moscow advertised February 10th of this year. We opened bids March 3rd of this year. Bids range from $1,025,088.98 to $2,285,746.76. The engineer's estimate was $1,276,956.50. Lowest responsive bid was from La Riviere at a little over $1 million. Staff recommends acceptance of the low bid from La Riviere, awarding the contract for the base bid in the amount of $1,025,088.98, and authorize staff approval of construction change orders in amount not to exceed 10% of the contract amount, or provide staff further direction. Any questions?
No.
Have you worked with Laurier in the city projects before?
Yeah, we worked with them on that East Street rebuild up there by Russell Elementary a couple years back.
And so I am curious, like with I would assume this project, and what is the timeline on it?
It cannot start earlier than May 18th.
Okay, great. And so, I mean, clearly being done during summer months and clearly that being ample pool time, what is the plan for when those both converge, like right around the pool? Like,
Ooh. I don't think we've had those conversations with La Riviere yet.
okay,
We can have those
Sure.
with them during like the pre-con meeting and stuff.
Just with all the kids coming and going, just want to make sure that there's clear, good foresight on
Yeah.
how to navigate all that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're not planning on any substantial impacts to traffic on Mountain View.
Okay.
Most of it's lane shifts, still facilitating all current modes of transportation on Mountain View. It's just going to be slight lane shifts, sidewalk closures, minor stuff.
Cool. Great. Any other questions?
Do you have an estimated completion date?
I think it's 60 days after the start date.
Nice. And also, yeah,
See how it
come-
goes.
Yeah, classics. Great. I unless further conversation, move
I
to
mean, one
approve.
other thing to note too, with the funding on this, the city had allocated originally, I think another 600,000 on top of it. So with how the bids
Yeah,
came
great.
in right now, we're only subject to our 7.34% match, which LTAC gave an estimate right now of $97,000. So
Great.
it's 500,000 less than what we had originally allocated.
It's great.
What do you think in general on this? Yeah.
Yeah, go to consent. Or
What's that?
should we go to consent or you want to go on?
It's certainly able to be on consent.
Let's do that.
It's up to the,
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Cool. Great.
sounds good.
Thank you. Will you remind me of your name for the record?
Luke.
Thank you, Luke.
Yeah, no
I apologize for asking. Thank you.
And I'm assuming recommended approval.
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
Great. Scott, hopefully you can come back for item number 5 here. Palouse Mall Lift Station Rehabilitation Project, bid results and contract award as well. Who and Evan is joining. All right.
I get in on the fun.
There we go. Good. Glad you could.
Good afternoon. So the Palouse Mall Lift Station Rehabilitation Project, we kicked off design of that at the tail end of 2024. So I was just going to give a brief recap on what that project consists of, and then Scott will go over the bid results with you guys. So vicinity of this, the Palouse Mall Lift Station is just now southwest of the new Chick-fil-A. It picks up roughly 190 acres of drainage for the sewer system. That station sees roughly 6 to 8% of the flow that comes into the facility. That pumps that over to the treatment process. The existing conditions out there, we currently have a wet well and a dry well, which is that station. Which is this pit over here in which we're looking in down there. So it's a flooded suction pump station right now from the 1970s. It was originally constructed in 76. It had electrical upgrades in 97 and in 2020, just to address the aging panel out there. It had wet well modifications in 2009 to put a larger barrel on the upper section to handle increased flows. And it currently pumps sewage up approximately 23 feet in elevation over a distance of 354 feet. The design of it, we would be rehabilitating the existing wet well. It meets the 50-year capacity outlook that we're looking at for that station. It was kind of determined based off the minimum and maximum amount of pump starts that we could handle out there. It would eliminate the dry well pump station, installation of 2 submersible pumps. There would be new electrical system and control valves out there, a new valve vault, flow meter, bypass vault to ensure that we can bypass the area. And then also installation of a new 16-inch force main to help us meet 2075 future flow projections. This is just a overview of how would we be installing the new force main, which would be going under the creek and also the railway out there, and then penetrating into our box A out at the facility, and it would be running in our current utility easement that we have out there for the existing force main to that station. You can see also the valve vault and flow meter would be outside of the existing station's footprint, just to the south of those. That's really space-wise all we can really work with. It's such a tight lift station footprint currently. With that, bid opening results that we got.
Yeah, we had advertised the bids back in January. This project had a little more time for the contractors to look everything over. We did get 5 bids back. Bids were open on March 3rd with bids ranging around 1.2 million to 1.9 million. Engineer's estimate on this was 2.1 million, which of what I've heard from our engineer on this, Ardura, they've had a few other bid openings recently where their estimate also had some contingency in it, knowing what prices were happening in the past few years. Apparently the bids have been really great on this type of work recently, so things have been a lot better than expected. The low responsive bid we got was from DW Excavating at $1,247,047. So staff recommends acceptance of the low bid from DW Excavating, awarding the contract in the amount of the $1,247,047 and authorizing the city engineer approval of construction change orders in an amount not to exceed 10% of the contract amount, or provide staff further direction.
I like that low bid compared to the estimate. That's fantastic.
I always like to ask if you've worked with them before and had any experiences with them.
DW Excavating, no. They're from Davenport, Washington. The group that we're working with, the consultant, has worked with them numerous times and seems to like working with them. Currently have other projects going on up in the Coeur d'Alene area, so.
I had a question on, since it goes through underneath the creek, we just discussed a creek project for the long going future. How does this potentially interfere or play alongside that? Maybe Bill would know on this.
Scott can
Okay.
answer that.
Yeah, I mean, for when they install the pipe, they're gonna basically dig it out and restore it back to its original conditions. They'll armor it through the area with
Okay.
appropriate sized rock. I mean, other than that, it's not gonna be filling in the channel. We already have all the permits and everything that we need to be able to do the work, the in-water work and everything.
Okay.
So it won't have any.
Won't be intrusive.
impacts. No, it won't be.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't believe I have any further questions other than, kind of estimated on the time frame.
Yeah, well, I guess once everything gets finalized, they have about 6 months to complete the project. So I think we'd be looking towards the very end of September, if all goes to plan. Yeah, so pretty quick project.
Yeah,
There's still railroad tracks there?
I think there is.
Yeah, there are.
So do they have to, I'm just curious because I'm curious. Do they have to bore under those? Because if they have to bore under those, they might have to just bore under the creek too.
Yeah, and they have the option in there of choosing to go some other direction, like HDPE or something, if they want to go that direction. It hasn't really been discussed if they want to propose that alternative.
There's no railroads are almost harder than creeks to go across.
Typically, railroad
I think
ballast.
that
is the-
one, if I recall correctly, was owned by McGregor, so it's not owned by a railroad any longer.
Okay.
That portion of that spur and that frontage was purchased by McGregor, which would probably be much easier to work with than.
And we already have existing easements through that area.
Nice.
Just curious.
Anything else, gentlemen? No? Cool. Recommend for approval, acceptance of the bid? Yeah. On to consent.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys.
Thank you.
All right, and item number 6, 2025 Water, Sewer, and Stormwater Utility Rate Study. Tyler, good afternoon.
Gentlemen, pleasure to join you this afternoon. I'm going to be joined by a rotating host of co-presenters on this one.
Great. Bring him on.
So we've got Justin Kilborn, our water manager, up here first, and then we'll be bringing up later in the presentation, Evan Timar will be coming back up. And then we'll have Dan Schoenberg, who's coming up as a representative of our Citizen Rate Committee for this one. So,
Great.
So yeah, rate study. This is, the city conducts utility rate studies on a pretty routine basis. And the rate studies are critical because they're a tool for us to make sure that we are collecting the revenues necessary to responsibly run our utilities. A utility system it's a publicly owned utility system. It's something that as a community we need as backbone infrastructure. And so the city of Moscow has a long history of responsible maintenance, of making sure that we are doing preventative maintenance and not just reactive maintenance. And so the reason that we do rate studies is because, one, our utilities have to be financially self-supporting. So they're what are called an enterprise fund in our system. And that means that the rates that we collect support those activities to deliver those services to the customers of those services. And that the rates that we collect can only go to support those activities. And so when we collect water rates, it goes to water activities. When we collect sewer rates, it goes to sewer. And that's what it has to go. Legally, that's what we have to spend those on. And also, it's to make sure that within the classes of the rates, that the rates are fair and equitable. And so the first step within a sewer rate study or within a utility rate study is to establish what does it cost to provide this service, and then we look at who should be paying for that cost. Make sure that we have an equitable distribution of that cost, and then how do we do that strategically? How do we approach doing that? And so the first step is the revenue requirement. And so we look at what does that need? What does that cost? And then we look at the cost of service within those equitable classes. How much does it cost? And then we design a rate so that we can meet the needs of that utility. This kind of just goes through what that process is. So the steps for the rate setting process. And I do want to say that we will have the consultant FCS who helped the city with this process. They will be here for the April 6th City Council meeting and be able to field any number of technical and accounting questions that the council may have at that point. And so we do plan a more comprehensive presentation on the technical side of this at that April 6th meeting. So step one is our revenue requirement. We define what are the overall needs for revenue, and that looks at the revenue, at the debt servicing for any acquired debt that the utility may already carry. It looks at operation and maintenance, capital needs, and then it looks at required reserves. And so those are all the components that go into the revenue. The next step is the cost of service. The cost of service defines the customer classes. How do we want to chop it up? And cities do this in a lot of different ways. And so you define how is it most logical and rational for us to divide our customer classes in a way that reflects their burden on the system. And then how do you allocate those costs? And then the third step is to design the rates. And the two components of the rate design are really a fixed charge and a variable charge. And there's always a balancing act for cities between a fixed charge and a variable charge. The fixed charge, the benefits of the fixed charge are it gives predictable income to the utility. And obviously for utility services, predictability is key. These are systems that have to run 24/7, 365. They've always got to be reliable. And so that fixed charge does that. But the benefit of variable charges is that it better allocates cost according to use. And so it helps you really dial in what's that somebody is paying for how much they're actually using the system. And so we really try and strike a balance between those two things, between having enough fixed charge that we know we've got sustainable revenues to sustain the utility, but then variable charge so that we can also have that ability to charge people commensurately with their use of the respective systems. So in early 2025, the city contracted with FCS. FCS is a group that specializes and focuses on utility rate studies. The city has a tradition of bringing in a third party so that we do have a third party taking a look at this and giving us feedback on how those systems are functioning, and they're able to make recommendations based on industry standards, what they're seeing in other places, and give us that third party objective review of our systems. In addition to that, the city fields a citizen rate committee. The mayor appoints members to this committee, and the goal of the committee is to be representative of the different rate classes. And so we try to bring in people who can represent different rate classes, be it single family, commercial, industrial, multifamily, and so that we have good representation. And that citizen rate committee reviews all of these processes as we're putting them together. So they're going through the review process along with staff and seeing all the same data and information. And then they have the ability to make a recommendation, the Citizen Rate Committee, as they go through this. And so the Citizen Rate Committee for this, we had 3 formal meetings of the Citizen Rate Committee. And then in between those meetings, there were a number of things that were sent out, a lot of communication. We had some video recordings that went out, a lot of documentation, PowerPoint presentations. And then that culminated with a final meeting and a unanimous vote by the Citizen Rate Committee that we'll cover as we move forward in this. So getting into the revenue requirement, one of the interesting things about utilities that I think is important to be aware of is that the standard CPI, so standard inflation, construction inflation has always been higher than that. Usually, sometimes as much as 2, usually 1.5 to 2 times higher. One of the reasons is we entered this particular rate study, we were, I guess, nervous may actually be the right word, to see what might come out, because we'd been hearing that there were a lot of utilities that were seeing some double-digit increases across the board or more because of this spike that you see right here, which is a result of the of the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting infrastructure bill that came out. We had the ARPA funds and the infrastructure bill that hit simultaneously, really flooded the market with a lot of dollars for government projects. And we saw spiking inflation in the construction sector pretty considerably, as you can see. But the point of the matter is that we're always combating this, which has historically been the case forever, is that the construction inflation always outpaces standard inflation. So I'm going to get into the key components here of each utility, and I've got the utility managers here. Steve Schulte, who's the storm utility manager, unfortunately is out ill today, so I'll cover his section. But I'm going to let Justin run through just some of the specifics for the water utility, what's driving the rates and what he's seeing with water.
Thanks, Tanner. Good afternoon. So what we've got out of this so far is that there's no structural changes in water. All the base rates, everything's going to stay the same. So we're good on that. But some of the driving factors is the aging water infrastructure that we have. We have over 6,500 connections and 100 miles of pipe, and it's all outdated. A lot of it is outdated in the center of town, so that's driving the costs up a lot. Ongoing upkeep is necessary to maintain reliable and safe drinking water. Major capital investments are required to address long-term system needs. There's $13.6 million allocated in the CIP, excuse me, from 2025 until 2031. Well 10 is on the outlying edge of this, and it's 21.1 million out of the requested 34.4 million that we're going for. The well 10 is the highest producing well in the system right now, but it is high in iron and manganese. We're having to filter that. We need to filter that in the future. So we're trying to meet the regulatory compliance issues, which it's not a primary concern, but it is a notice as a secondary concern for DEQ. We're working on a chlorine study right now that'll help the impacts of the iron and manganese. That's going to be more funding that we're going to need throughout these next few years, which is why that spikes up. And like Tyler said, the construction costs have risen significantly with inflation in the construction sector far outpacing the standard inflation. We've remained operationally lean. We haven't added a new staff member from the last rate study or this rate study. We're not requesting another staff member. So we're still trying to stay as lean as we can and as fiscally responsible as we possibly can. And despite efficiency efforts, the rate increases are still needed to fund infrastructure, replacement and major projects. Without these investments, the system risks declining water quality, reduced reliability, and insufficient funding for critical needs. So,
Yeah, and the thing that I would point out that I think Justin really touched on well is that as we look at these utilities, this rate study covers a 5-year period. So what's the rates that are proposed go out 5 years. But as we look at the capital planning, especially when we look at larger capital expenditures like the filtration at well 10, we try to anticipate those things so that one of the things we've consistently heard from our rate committee is that they prefer to see more predictable, consistent rate increases rather than sudden, staggered, large rate increases, which we have some examples from municipalities close to us where that's been the case, where all of a sudden it's a 20-30% increase in a single year because there's been a lot of deferred maintenance and then a big project comes on. And so that's something that we've consistently tried to do. And so as we look out, for example, at the filtration, while the filtration is outside of the 5-year window, we've pushed that outside the 5-year window for implementation. We try to start to accumulate because the city's approach has been more to fund things, to pay for things as we need things, rather than either have rapid rate increases or to go into debt for those things. And we do strategically go into debt when things make sense. There can be times where that really makes sense. For example, we completed a lot of our booster stations with SRF, State Revolving Loan Fund. The rates got really low, and you saw, if the rates are lower than what the construction inflation is going to be, that can be beneficial for us and a good strategy. And it's something that we analyze and implement, but it's always that balancing act. And so as you can see here, the O&M costs have stayed relatively consistent and low, but it's the capital rates that you see in the top bar that really drive that need for us to continue to generate funds to keep the water department and the water utility solvent. Do you have any questions on water before we move on to sewer?
I don't believe so. I'd like to, offer a compliment on keeping your staff lean and keeping that's a major feat, especially kind of with this kind of operation. So well done, Justin, and well done to the team.
Yeah, it is. The system continues to grow.
Yeah.
In the last 10 years, in the previous 5 years, we didn't add staff. In this, we're not proposing adding staff, and that's, there's some efficiencies that we found. Some of those are just through getting the right equipment, staging that appropriately, but a lot of it is just Justin and his staff working hard to make sure that they run a lean operation and that we're utilizing the hours that we have.
And also, just for sake of clarity, where is well 10?
Well 10 is out at the state line. So if you go up on the far end of A Street, there's the LDS church that's there just past the LDS church on the right-hand side there above the La Quinta Inn. That's where well 10 is located. Great.
Question, Scott, Sage?
The only question, you talked about the miles and miles of pipe and where you're so far behind in upkeep or maintenance of the actual pipe. Is that something, do we have those in our plan to be replacing those? And looking at those, and that's taken into account with this, correct?
Yeah, we have a capital improvement plan that prioritizes pipe replacement. We've also looked at strategies like the potential for doing some more in-house construction. I think, we're really going to have to come up with some creative strategies. The hard pipe to get out often is just, it's not that expansion that we need or that upsizing for distribution. Those kind of things, sometimes we can find grants for, often we can prioritize funding those in the CIP. The hard ones are, it's just a neighborhood pipe that's old. It's just a pipe that goes on a neighborhood street. It's old, it needs to be replaced. And so this does take that into account. But we also continually look for strategies to be able to stretch those dollars further to be able to get more of that done. All right, if there's no more questions on water, we'll move on to sewer.
Thank you, Justin. Yeah. Welcome back, Evan.
Yeah. Alrighty. So yeah, just some context on what we're looking at with sewer and what's driving the average 2.8% increase for the sewer side of the utility. Obviously, the major component of it is the wharf, the facility that built into our capital plan. A good large chunk of our current 5-year outlook for capital is designated out at the wharf. We do have 2 sizable conveyance system projects, one being the University Heights project, and then 2, our Southeast Lift Station upgrade or bypass, which would be bypassing all of the flow down to our South Lift Station. And so those are 2 huge projects that are built into this rate study process. And so we would be, we have, in addition to that, a third of our system is older clay infrastructure. And so a lot of that pipe is built into our CIP currently as well, especially the ones that we do have capacity related concerns or anything that has been highlighted mainly on our sewer comprehensive plans as well. And then a lot of it is just regulatory compliance. There's things out of the facility that we can't really not do. And so we have to address those as well. So yeah, the $45 million CIP is a large component of that. We've obviously been planning for that. We've through the last 2 rate studies, we've known about a lot of these larger components in them. So we've been able to keep the annual average increase fairly low. There was a cost of service finding that would be changing in our overall rate structure. We have the residential rate, which would be staying the same, but the multifamily rate, which was similar to our single family rate, which was just a base rate that people pay for. We're looking at the recommendation of changing that to a consumption base as well. So we'd have a minimum base and then a consumption fee component to that as well, which would allow for conservation efforts if people did want to use less water, that it would be metered, and then they would pay a lower sewer bill.
That currently does not exist.
Currently does not exist.
That came as a recommendation from our Citizen Rate Committee during the last rate study. There was a desire for the city to look at that, in part driven by a desire for affordability that, currently with the way it's structured, a studio apartment would pay the same in theory as a 3-bedroom, 3-bath apartment where their loading could be very different. So there was a desire to try and implement a multifamily consumption rate so that we could reward folks for using less water and therefore their sewer bill would be impacted by that, had less weight on the sewer.
Yeah.
Are that many multifamilies metered individually though?
Yeah. Majority of
Are metered individual units? Or
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, exactly. And so we would be looking at
The water meter?
Right, because that's what we're talking, because water that's how you're building your sewer, right? So water, are each of those the facilities themselves, like you're saying, a studio versus a 3-bedroom?
So some of them are, some of them are not. And so that's why within this plan, we have a 2-year implementation window where we work toward determining how we would do implementation for this, working with our finance department and looking at those accounts.
Yeah. So depending on what months we're averaging for winter weather flow, just designating, December through February or maybe a longer period to be able to get a good glimpse of what that baseline flow looks like and then be able to average that out for those units. And so it was also recommended to look at phasing that in. So we wouldn't just go all or nothing. We would start with a base rate and then a 90% consumption component. So there would only be that 10% that would essentially change, and then move it to going 50% on the consumption side. So yeah, we would likely introduce that multifamily volume component into the sewer side of things. But other than that, there are, as our consultant will address next week, some of the other classes that we're underpaying. So like the commercial medium account, that would go up slightly at a higher increase, so a 6% annual increase, versus the multifamily accounts would go up 2.1% over the next 5 years of this process.
So just to emphasize, so there is one structural change that is included in the sewer recommendations, and that is this change to allow for the consumption rates for multifamily. And there's the 3-year phased implementation. So the first year's 90-10 would be the goal to have, and then to offset to 75-25. And then the final phase of that would be a 50-50. So it would be split 50% between base rate and 50% consumption on the multifamily.
Yeah, and we wouldn't likely start that until 2028.
Any
What
questions on
what would
sewer?
be like the communication of rolling out that potential new program? Would that go on the water bills, or would there be
We'll have a whole
sewer bills
communication and
plan?
outreach plan that we'll put together for that. That's likely to include direct outreach, postcards in the water bills. And so that communication will go out, and also just as an opportunity for us to promote conservation as well. That's one of the reasons that for the delays that we want to be able to get communication out about ways that people can have a positive impact on their own bill, that they can it gives them some time to change out fixtures or adjust landscaping or do those types of things in order to prepare for this.
Yeah, I mean, as presented today, I'm excited about what that could potentially look like for many reasons, and especially to add on the work that Kelly and her team have also been doing. Just like I think that being kind of casting a wide net there for long-term goals in a lot of different ways, I think is great. So yeah, excited to see how that progresses.
Great.
Yeah, thanks, Evan.
With that, we'll move on to the storm utility. So the stormwater utility is our newest utility. It's our smallest utility. We have 3 full-time staff members in storm. We have a supervisor and we have 2 operators in storm. The storm utility was formed after we received an MS4 permit, a municipal stormwater permit under the NPDES guidelines from the federal government. That's now being administered by the state of Idaho. They pursued and were granted primacy. We finished that first term, and as we established the stormwater utility, the initial stormwater study for the formation of the utility was premised on doing an inventory, because really we just didn't know what we had out there. The maintenance of that system has been reactive from the time it was installed. We have pipes that have been installed and been in the ground for 100 years that nobody's looked at. If they haven't physically backed up, nothing's happened with them. We didn't have the equipment or personnel to do routine cleaning. And so it was just, if there were clogs, people went out and took care of it. And so the idea was that we would spend this first period to really start to get an inventory of the system, and that's moving forward. We have a truck, we have a camera, we're cleaning, we're inspecting, and starting to generate a CIP. And then in addition to that, we have the creek maintenance plan that came before the council during their last session. And so that is also incorporated into the stormwater rates. And so stormwater sees the biggest proposed increases on a percentage basis. And that is just largely driven by having a capital plan where there was none. So you can see on this chart here where, stormwater, the O&M just really doesn't change a ton, but we just start to see the capital impacts. Again, there's no proposed new staff for stormwater within this rate study. This is truly just inflationary costs on O&M and then generating a capital program and implementing the creek maintenance plan. So I'm gonna move through these relatively quick because we will go through these in a lot more detail at the council meeting. But this is kind of just a reiteration of what the revenue requirement is, what it's constituted of. And so basically just saying that we've got to fund O&M, we've got to fund capital in any debt. And to get on to this is what's being proposed. And so in order to meet the obligations that we're showing here, what we would have is a 5.15% increase starting in FY27 for water, going out through the term of this study. Sewer would have a 2.8% increase from FY27 through FY31. And then stormwater is really where you see the big percentage increase, but because the stormwater utility it's a much lower monetary number, the overall percentage impact on the bill isn't nearly as great, but it does see a 29% increase for 2 years and then a 15% increase in the third. And then that really starts to level out as you get into FY30 and FY31. But what you can see here is the average bill increase overall. So you've got this line represents what that average bill increase looks like overall. And so we have these 2 years, we got the 5.66 and 6, and then we start to come down with the 5.3, 4.3, 4.3. This final line here, it represents the average residential bill. So what the average resident sees for their utility bill, and that's combined. And then the final line is the impact. That's the dollar impact on that average residential bill annually for each of those periods. Excuse me. What did I say? Annually? Monthly. Yeah, that's an important correction. I'm gonna get hung if I get that one wrong.
You'd be so lucky, right?
Yeah. These also, so these were staff recommendations. This was also the recommendations that were reviewed by the Citizen Rate Committee. Included in your packet was a summary of the Citizen Rate Committee activities. And the Citizen Rate Committee and staff had the same recommendation. It was a unanimous recommendation by the Citizen Rate Committee, and staff was in alignment with that recommendation. One of the big points of discussion that I want to bring up was we had a discussion about the stormwater. We was already seeing some pretty significant, obviously, percentage increases. The original plan, there were two options presented to the Citizen Rate Committee. One had the creek maintenance plan in an accelerated way with a project annually, and the other defer, and that obviously had a really big impact because that's a big driver of capital funds. And so the second option was to have an every other year project, which staff felt was more realistic anyway. We just don't feel like with this initial, it's going to take a lot of work, a lot of planning, a lot of coordination. We feel like in every other year is far more realistic for the implementation of that plan anyway. So we felt like that was appropriate. And then the last thing I want to point out before I ask Dan Schoenberg to come up and talk about the Citizen Rate Committee activities is that with the rate study, the council adopts the rate study and staff uses that as the guiding document then as we formulate our budgets and we formulate our capital plans. But the council does annually get the opportunity to decide if they want to implement the rates. So each year the council will take this into consideration. Our previous rate study ran through 2025, but we ended up having a pause in rate increases because of COVID. And so that can happen, when you have an acute need that outweighs the deferred maintenance, ultimately the systems cost what they cost. If you've cut the fat and you're running the system, it just costs what it costs. And so we can defer maintenance for a year, but it doesn't go away. The pipes don't suddenly renew themselves. Sometimes there is an acute event. And so for the COVID delay, we ended up delaying that year. And so that's why you see reflected in the FY26 numbers. Those are actually the last year of what was in this previous rate study that was intended to be last year, but everything got pushed a year. So yeah, annually the council gets an opportunity to review and fill and determine if they think that it's appropriate for each year's budget. With that, I'd like to ask Dan if he can come up and give us a quick summary of the Citizen Rate Study activities.
Dan, welcome up.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing to hear some comments.
Happy to.
I think I started on the first rate commission, and I've been on every rate commission since then. It doesn't matter whether it's sanitation, water, sewer, garbage.
And what year was that, if you can name that off the top of your head?
So this was clear back with Reedner 10 years ago. Well, more than 10 years ago, because the multifamily conversation that we're talking about with sewer, I started that conversation about 9.5 years ago now. Okay. We're finally to the point that we're structurally doing something in the system on the sewer side of things to try to balance out what tenants need to pay and what is their equitable amount to pay.
Sure.
So, I'm experienced on the rate committee, get into a lot of capital information. I probably dig in a little bit more than others, but we have a self-interest. And so just to put it into context, we manage about 260 buildings here in town, round figure 1,400 units of multifamily, single family, duplex, commercial. We have a few garages that aren't tied into the system other than the stormwater system. So,
Yeah.
And so we kind of see a broad spectrum of what this study does and what it affects, and how it affects community members, both homeowners and tenants alike. So, I'd like to commend the staff in this process. It's a lot of good conversation, and there's a lot of education that takes place, especially with new people on the rate commission. I think the end results when we come down to the recommendations, and it was a unanimous recommendation from the committee, but we were able to talk through a number of things and make some adjustments in what we're talking about.
How many people sit on the commission?
10.
10. Okay, great. Thank you.
There's 10 individuals on the commission. So we went through the process, talked a lot about capital projects, about cost of service and understanding cost of service functions. One of the things that, and I don't want to go through all the information. I just want to highlight a couple of items.
Sure.
And one in particular that's not in the rate study, and that is I'm going to encourage the council to look at water sewer deposits. I think right now they are at a level that's below the average water sewer costs in the system. I say that from a standpoint of two things. One, in the rental world, we see a lot of turnover. And what happens when we have a deposit that's not adequate to take care of the last month's worth of services is we are exchanging checks with the city, $12, $5, $8 to cover differences associated to the use of water sewer garbage. And it's a lot easier process if there's a deposit there that is equal to the average. We don't get rid of all of them by any means, but it helps a great deal. And the way the process works today is if there's an outstanding balance on an account from a tenant that moved out, and let's just say it's $5, the city will not put it in the new tenant's name until the $5 is paid. And that just causes additional transactions between the property management, landlords, tenants. We're billing the tenant. And so it's an inefficient piece unless we do that, an adequate deposit. The multifamily one is kind of near and dear. Like I say, it's been a 10-year process on that one. And I think Tyler explained a little bit about that, but I'm going to put it in the context of a number of our tenants who are on fixed income, Social Security. They live in a studio or a one-bedroom apartment. They were taking the sewer rate associated to that unit and paying the full load. And if I have a unit that has 5 people in it, 4-bedroom apartment with 2.5 bath, they were paying that same load divided by 5 people. And their fixed income increases on an annual basis just don't keep up with what we're seeing on this. And so we're kind of excited about the piece. It'll be interesting to see how we settle in on the calculation for the rate side, or for the usage side. I would have done it a little bit different than the water. I would have made it pretty simple. I would have just used a bedroom count per unit and done it with that, because that's readily available through county tax rolls.
Right.
And you don't have to go out and do calculations and measurements and things like that. But I'll follow along with the rate study and see how that works. And I'm sure I'll have some input into it.
So the last thing, and thank you so much, Dan, is Dan's been a stalwart on the rate committee. Sage participated prior to being on council in this rate study Citizen Rate Committee, and really appreciate it. These are people who volunteer their time. It's a lot of hours, it's a lot of content, and they all take it very seriously. The last thing I want to point out before I wrap up and ask if there's any additional questions, there's another component to this study. Was we talk about the cost of service results, and this is just the equity within classes. The city has been subsidizing the cemetery. We've had a special rate for the cemetery. It's the only special rate that we have. And with some of the more recent actions that have happened, we're really just not able to continue to subsidize a rate class. We have to make sure that each class is paying within a rate of reasonable what their imposition on the system is. And so knowing this was coming, we've had conversations with the cemetery district and with their commissioners and encouraged them to take a look at potentially getting on a well. You know, the cemetery is pretty limited with the revenue that it can raise. They're on a far end of town, probably can pretty easily hit the Wanapum Aquifer, which we don't draw nearly as much water from. It may make a lot more sense for the cemetery to be on a well over on that edge of town. And so that's what they're pursuing. We had an update today that the commissioners have approved that going out to bid for a well. And so we've been working with them on that concept, and they anticipate doing this. What this study recommends is that we have a 2-year period where we hold their rates lower. And then what you'll find in your packet is that in that 3rd year of the implementation of this study, there are some pretty significant increases to bring them in alignment with their cost of service, so that by the end of this rate term, if they do decide that they want to stay on city water, they're in alignment with the cost of service, with what it costs to provide that service to the cemetery. So that's just the other big outlier that I want to point out that is contained in this, where there is some pretty significant movement. And with that, I'm happy to stand for any questions that the committee might have. I can get to the results sheet that I've got here at the end again.
Dan, how many times year would you say that the CRC meets, or every couple months, or?
The rate committee?
Mhm.
Actually, the rate committee is only established for a specific study.
Okay.
So, and the next one will probably be coming up as a sanitation one.
Sanitation will come back up in 2 years, I
2
think.
years. So they'll establish a committee for that. We'll probably meet about 4 months in that process, but only probably 3 or 4 times.
Okay.
There's a lot of dialogue that happens in between.
Yeah.
And then the committee is disbanded, and there's a new committee is appointed.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I think I'm excited to bring this to full council. And are you bringing everybody back with you?
We'll be back with everybody that's been here today. Plus, we'll have the consultants on board so that we can
Great.
try and field any questions that the council might have. Yeah, and Steve should be fully healed by then.
Yeah, I think one thing that going through this, and I appreciate everybody that came up to offer their perspective and their experience on this, just of the way that from the city municipality's perspective of being transparent on how we set and kind of understand these rates. I think that it's really important I think it's really important to be in that public sphere of making this known. So really appreciate the work and everything that's stated. So yeah, excited for this to I imagine we recommend approval, but coming back, to full council.
Right.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
See you guys on the 6th.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And with that, we will adjourn for 30 seconds and make things happen in now 22 seconds. All right.